So I'm not opposed to universal health care. And when people say, well, there's, every Western country already has universal health care. Yeah, but they might have started in 1922 to put it together. And they say we can do all this in 2 years. Hell no. They say that the Secretary of Health and Human Services is the right person to pick it to work through this. Somebody who's appointed politically. Hell no. Right? How would that be working out for us right about now?
This is What It Takes from Unmoderated News. I'm Sarah McCammon. Most people know Mark Cuban as the Shark Tank guy or the longtime owner of the Dallas Mavericks. A few years ago, he started a pharmaceutical company, Cost Plus Drugs, to cut out the middleman in an industry he says is broken. He wants healthcare for all, if not Medicare for all, and he's got some ideas about how to get there. Mark Cuban, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
When I heard you were starting a drug company a few years ago, I have to say I was a little bit surprised. It sort of seemed, like a departure for you. From what I understand, this all started with a cold pitch from a doctor who had this big idea. And you must get tons of pitches from people, right? Wanting all kinds of things from you. Like, why did this one catch your eye?
I mean, nobody thinks about the economics of healthcare and says, wow, this is great. There's no reason to improve it. Let's just keep it the way it is. And so when Dr. Oshmansky emailed me, I was like, okay, the time is right to start considering healthcare. And what his original idea was, and we followed through on it, was there are a lot of generic drugs that go on short supply, which makes no sense, right? And the manufacturers will let them, go on short supply so they can raise the price. So he came to me and said, okay, we should put together a manufacturing plant that can make these things more cost effectively and always be in stock. I was like, well, that's a cool idea, and that's definitely worth considering and potentially pursuing. But let me dig in some more and get to understand the pharmaceutical industry a little bit more. And that was right around the time the pharma bro, Martin Shkreli, was going to jail or something was going on with him. And what he had done was take a generic drug, Daraprim, and basically buy up the source of it and then jack up the price dramatically, like 750% or whatever it was.
And that was a really important drug, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking it, it's very important to you. He made it so a lot of people who had been buying it for just, a few dollars can no longer afford it. And to me, that was like, well, how does this happen? And so as I started digging into it more, it became very obvious that the pharmaceutical industry was not transparent in the least bit. It was controlled by, pharmacy benefit managers and others that didn't care about trying to, make things affordable for patients. And so I was like, Alex, we can build manufacturing because there's a valuable need there, but we need to create a website where people can trust what they're going to pay and know what they're going to pay before they go to the drugstore or before they buy their medications. Because we had all heard the stories about people being in line at the pharmacy and then all of a sudden turning around because they couldn't afford it and they had no idea that they weren't going to be able to afford it. And that led to creating costplusdrugs.com. But what makes us different is we show you our actual cost. And we show you that our markup is only 15%. So by only marking it up 15%, we're going to be a lot cheaper than most others that sell it. And because we publish a price list of all of our drugs with our cost and markup, and we're still 4 years later the only company to do that, we've been able to have a big influence, not just with the customers who buy from us, but on the entire industry.
So, Mark, you've figured out a way to tackle this through the private sector, but is this something that regulators, lawmakers, the government should have addressed?
I mean, you would think so. People are getting ripped off. They're being overcharged for their medications. Why can't the government do something? But on the flip side, they're the ones that let it get to this point. If they understood how the industry worked, if they understood the nuanced details and the interrelationships between these big insurance companies, pharmacy benefit managers, clearinghouses, et cetera, they would have stopped it in the first place. So, I wish they would have stopped it because it would have helped a lot of patients, but I don't think they're qualified or capable at this point in time.
Is there a bigger lesson, though, for healthcare as a whole? I mean, you've gotten at this one significant piece of it, which is the cost of generic prescription drugs. But there's so much more that drives up
Mhm.
people's healthcare costs.
Sure.
What do you think might get at the bigger problem?
First and foremost, there's no transparency at the pricing level or at the contract level. And so, if you think about how people get their insurance and get their medications and get their health care, we really don't know what the price is. If you're an employer that has employees and you're providing benefits to them, you don't know what the price of an operation is going to be. You don't know what the price of care is going to be. You don't know what the price that you're paying for a medication is going to be. You are completely in the dark, which makes no sense at all. You would think that it should be something that we all should know about. And not only do you not know the actual prices, but the number one rule of contracting in healthcare is you can't talk about contracting in healthcare. It's just like Fight Club. And because of that lack of transparency at the contract and pricing level, everything is a mess. And I'll give you the craziest example. There is a pharmacy benefit manager named Express Scripts that runs the TRICARE program for our military, current military, retired family members, etc. When they distribute medications to family members or military members themselves, they not only charge a copay to that person, but they charge the government a fee for that medication. So Elizabeth Warren and Josh Hawley both asked Express Scripts to be able to see the amount of money that the government actually pays for the medications that our military uses. They refused to provide it. Refused to provide it. Elizabeth told me that she asked if they could go into a SCIF, a secure environment, to look at those prices. They just wanted to have a feel and an understanding for what the prices would be. They refused to do it. So if the
And
company
and they
that
could do that because legally they don't have to?
legally they don't have to right now, and that's just complete insanity. And so if the company that the federal government hired to provide medications to active military and their families and retirees, and they won't show the price to a senator, I mean, what does that tell you about how things are going? And, when we extend that or extrapolate it to talk about universal health care like Medicare for all, it's hard to get to a point where you can plan out how to get from where we are today to a universal healthcare system when you don't even know the price of medications, the price of care, the actual out-of-pocket costs or what the government is paying, and it's completely opaque. Those are the problems that underpin the issues we're having in the system today.
I mean, I see what you're saying about transparency. At the same time, like a lot of people have pointed out that healthcare is just, it's a service it's different from like getting your house painted, right? Like you can shop
Sure.
around, you can pick the best
Right.
contractor, but sometimes with healthcare, there, maybe there aren't many providers who can do what you need, or maybe you're in an emergency situation, right? So
Oh, and I'm
how
not talking about individuals having to shop, right? Because I agree with you. If you just had a wreck, you just want to get to the hospital and get fixed up. You're not going to shop. And if a big company who shops for the benefits that you use can't negotiate a price that they understand or know what they're paying, you can't expect an individual to be able to do it either. And that's a symptom of the bigger problem of no transparency. Because once things become transparent at the contractual and at the pricing level, at least, then people can use those as benchmarks and to compare prices and to understand what's going on in the marketplace. Whereas right now they can't.
now you mentioned Medicare for all.
Mhm.
You've been critical of that idea. There are lots of ideas about how to get everybody covered, but what are you worried about with Medicare for all?
So I love the concept of universal healthcare. Like, when people ask me, well, what do you think about Medicare for all? And, they may be libertarian and no government involved. And I'm always like, look, if it costs $1 per person per month to provide universal health care, would you say yes and let the government pay for it? And everybody's like, yeah, 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 yeah. So it's not a question of whether people want it. It's a question of what does it cost and how do you get from where we are today to where we want to be so that people so that healthcare becomes effectively a right. And that's the hard part. How do you get from where we are today to that destination? Right now, I mean, if you look at the legislation that's been written by Bernie Sanders and Representative Jayapal, it doesn't have a plan. Basically, what it says is, you know, within the next 2 years, at the discretion of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, a bunch of things have to happen. But it doesn't talk about how to get here from here to there. And then they'll show you models that have been done that says, well, we'll save $300 billion, or we'll cut administrative costs by 20, 30%. And that could be more than the $1 trillion. Conceptually, that's right, but doing a financial model is completely different than doing a model that incorporates behavioral changes. Because if all of a sudden the price that the Mayo Clinic gets for its most advanced medical services is only Medicare rates, and they've invested billions of dollars to be able to provide those services, they're not going to be able to stay in business. And so you have to be able to accommodate reality and context and recognize that if you're going to model this, if you're going to try to get there, you have to literally talk to the CEOs of these hospitals and say, okay, I understand and recognize that you have invested billions of dollars and your business plan doesn't incorporate, only being paid Medicare rates. How do we evolve how you do business and how you operate, your cost of operations, to be able to incorporate that? And they say we can do all this in 2 years. Hell no. They say that the Secretary of Health and Human Services is the right person to pick it to work through this. Somebody who's appointed politically. Hell no. Right? How would that be working out for us right about now? And so you have to go through these steps. So I'm not opposed to universal health care. And when people say, well, every Western country already has universal health care. Yeah, but they might have started in 1922 to put it together. Or, maybe the latest one I think was Israel in 1995 when MRIs were just starting to happen. And then culturally, there's a lot of significant differences as well. Culturally, there's countries that, at the end of life, they're not saying, we'll spend an extra $1 million to keep grandpa alive an extra 30 days. They're saying, get your affairs ready because, that's not how we do it in this country. And so there's all these different differences that nobody is trying to understand and account for and put together into a plan. And if you can't plan it, it's not going to work.
You mentioned your concern about having political appointees fully in charge of the healthcare system. What do you worry about? What do you think could happen in a scenario like that?
Well, I mean, vaccines could be part of the offering for universal health care until they aren't, and now all of a sudden we have measles all over the country. Or, if there's another pandemic, God forbid, that's a legitimate concern. You have to take those things into account. And I don't think anybody has taken that step. It's become a great political talking point. It's so messed up. We need Medicare for all. And then people get mad at me when I say, okay, so what's your plan? Ideology is not a strategy. What's your plan to get from where we are today in our system to where you'd like to be, where, instead of a company paying $30,000 a year for the benefits for a family for five, they're paying that in taxes and it goes into a system so that they're not the ones that are offering healthcare benefits at all. It's coming via Medicare for all. That makes perfect sense to me. But you have to have a plan to make sure that you can implement it. Otherwise, it'll be worse because you won't have the benefits from your company in 3 years, and the hospital system will be turned upside down because they can't afford, the best hospitals can't afford to operate at the pricing you're giving them. And, and there's a variety of ways, a variety of things that you can do to start to put those pieces together, but nobody wants to do it because it's actual work.
Mark, how did you become so passionate about healthcare?
I mean, everybody hates it. And as an entrepreneur, when everybody hates something, that's usually an opportunity for a business. And, and when I say as a business, we're a public benefit corporation. I'm not trying to maximize my margins or my income. I just think, this is a way to give back. Cost plus drugs doesn't make money. We're close to break even. So I subsidize it some, but at some point, hopefully, we will make money off of it so we can keep on reinvesting. But I wanted to get into it because it has to be changed. And if we just wait on government or people just screaming Medicare for all, we'll be waiting forever. And hopefully, at some point, as we set precedents, then the government can start to pick and choose things. Imagine if every nonprofit hospital or provider had to publish their entire general ledger, every entry that goes into it, so that all of us get to see every single penny they spend and every source of revenue they have. So we can analyze it to say, okay, could they make money at Medicare rates? Or why is this hospital able to and this hospital is not able to? By having all this information, we're able to start moving forward. And, as an entrepreneur, I've had to do this exercise time and time again with companies I've started that have been disruptive, that have changed industries, that, I've learned how to do these things and I know what to look for. And that's what got me excited about doing it because I knew I can have an impact.
You're a billionaire. People don't like billionaires very much right now. You've been open about the fact that there's a certain amount of luck involved in becoming one. But why do you think it is that for so many people, billionaires are kind of a symbol of everything that's wrong with the economy?
Because it's easy. And some of them are dicks. When you have that much money and you're an asshole and you're just trying to make more money, you deserve all the not I want to don't want to say abuse, but all the consternation, all the negative posts, all the trolling, that's the right word. You deserve all the trolling that you get. I mean, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I mean, I never in my wildest dreams imagined to be in this situation financially. And doing things like cost plus drugs, helping people, get claimable to come wherever I can help people, I feel like that's my obligation. You have other people that you see at the top of the wealth list that don't feel the same way. Or if they do, they're not disclosing it. And so it's understandable because it's hard to relate. Like when I became a billionaire, it was just insane. Like there was no way I could ever possibly understand what it would be like. And, I don't blame people for getting upset. I really, really don't. I just hope they eat me last.
Do you want to name any names on who the dicks
Well, no,
are?
you just look at the top of the list and just look to see what they've done and you can come to your own conclusions.
You've also said you don't think that billionaires should sort of be legislated out of existence, though. Why not?
It would crush the economy, and I'll explain why. First of all, when you see $1 trillion net worth, when you see a $500 billion net worth, that's not cash. In fact, most of that is in stock holdings. And so when Elon was said to have $1 trillion net worth, that's when SpaceX and Tesla were at their highest levels at stock prices. And when those prices went down, he no longer was a trillionaire. And so, you know, you will see it's happened before and it'll happen again where the stock market crashes. And so you can try to take it all away, but if you try to take away all of their net worth, say down to $999 million, they're going to have to sell all their stock. And when they sell all their stock, the 61% of people in this country that own stocks either directly or indirectly through funds, et cetera, they're going to get hit too. They're going to lose a lot of their net worth as well. And so there's a lot of consequences involved. And on top of that, if you're getting taxed 5% of your net worth, once every 5 years, let's say in California, you're going to have to set aside a lot of cash. Not only sell shares of stock, but set aside cash because you don't know what your net worth is going to be. If the stock market keeps on going up and 5% keeps on becoming a big number and you have to turn that 5% into cash, you're selling shares of stock, which you may not think is a big deal, but you're retaining a lot of cash, which means you're not in a position to invest that cash. And if you're not in a position to invest that cash, then there are a lot of entrepreneurs that come on the Shark Tank that are going to be disappointed because, there's not as much cash available for them. And if, startups and small businesses, they create 60% of the new jobs every year in this country. And a lot of that comes from wealthier people investing in those companies.
People talk a lot about the wealth gap, the delta between the very richest and the very
Mhm.
poorest. Like, how worried are you about the gap?
Very worried. I mean, nobody wants to see civil unrest. Nobody wants to see people who can't live their lives, and pay for food or pay for housing or pay for transportation or afford their gas. That is not what this country should be all about. But that comes down to basically two elements, right? Does somebody own appreciable assets? Because if you own stock in SpaceX, I think Elon created 4,000 millionaires when they went public. And he gives everybody shares of stock in his companies. So if you work at Tesla, if you work at SpaceX, when those prices, those stocks go up, your net worth goes up, and those people aren't talking about income inequality for themselves. I mean, I would like to see it so that every single CEO slash founder slash entrepreneur does what I did, which was to give equity to every single employee. Every company I've ever sold, I've given money to every single employee. Every time. The way you're going to reduce income inequality for anybody who works for somebody is making sure they get shares of stock. And then
But
they
Mark,
benefit.
that was voluntary. You chose to do that,
No,
and
I
that's
know I did,
great.
right, right, but you can incent that action from, CEOs. You
How?
can give them incentives to say, "Look, if you want that, 21% tax rate, then you need to give every single employee the same percentage in stock, warrants, options, whatever it may be, of their cash compensation that you give to the CEO in cash compensation. So if the CEO gets $100,000 worth of stock because they make $1 million in cash, and the janitor makes $50,000, then they deserve, the same percentage in stock, and that will change the game. And if you don't do that, then your taxes go back up to Obama rates of 27% or whatever it was.
I was gonna ask, I mean, what about the folks who don't work for these successful companies? What is the role of more taxes on
Well,
billionaires?
hopefully, if more people are seeing their net worth increase, then they're spending more money. They have a wealth effect, and that's impacting other people as well. They can start companies and hire people, but you're never going to hit 100%, right? Just like right now, we have Medicaid, we have all kinds of programs, we have SNAP, and there's still people struggling. And I wish there was a way to overcome that homelessness. I just don't know what the answer to that is.
Is there a point at which one individual or a few individuals becoming so wealthy becomes an actual threat to democracy?
No, because if democracy can't handle somebody's bank account, then it probably wasn't, democracy isn't strong enough. I mean, in this country, we've had huge wealth gaps before. And so I don't think that's a reflection of the quality of our democracy. I think participation is a reflection. I think information and education is a reflection. But I think we have bigger issues in terms of how our democracy survives and operates than anybody's individual wealth. I mean, our far bigger problem, in my opinion, are social media algorithms. Whatever it is you think, you get more of when you go on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and that just reinforces what you already think. And if you already have a negative attitude about somebody, something, some process, you're just going to get more and more and more of it. And those politicians who know how to game that algorithm, they're the ones we get more of. And you're starting to see younger politicians having learned from Donald Trump. Zohar Mandami, I think when it comes to social media, obviously not politically, when it comes to social media, he's almost as good, if not better, than Trump at manipulating the algorithms and flooding the zone and being creative. You saw some of the really progressive candidates that upset incumbents the past couple of weeks that are great at social media. They get it. The older folks that are running as politicians were buying TV ads and had no idea. And so he or she who controls the algorithm has more impact on our democracy than any amount of money.
Yeah, I wanna ask you about the Democratic Socialists of America. You just alluded to that movement. There's a lot of energy around the DSA in the Democratic primaries. A
Mhm.
lot of the support is coming disproportionately from college-educated, wealthier white voters, while a
Yeah.
lot of people of color and working class voters are supporting more traditional Democrats or even Republicans. I wonder what you make of that.
I don't know. I really, really don't. My first thought is it's in a primary where there's not a lot of voters. And when you have energy and momentum in a primary, there's a really good chance you're going to win. And we'll see what happens in the general. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I look at Mandami and I think his use of social media is brilliant. Do I think the rent freeze will get the results that he expects over the long term? No, I don't. Historically, they have not. Do I understand why people are demanding it and want it and just want wins for themselves? Yes. I think it's one of the key reasons why Donald Trump won both times. When I talked to friends in Texas and I said, "Why are you voting for Donald Trump?" One repetitive response was, "I've been voting for politicians my entire life and they've done nothing for me." You know the definition of insanity. And I think the same thing applies with, candidates that adhere to the DSA approach. The kids and the younger adults that are voting for them over the last 10 years, they haven't seen politicians give them the things or earn the things that they're looking for. So why would you vote for a traditional candidate?
What do you think the rise of this movement might mean for the Democratic Party?
I mean, first of all, let me say I'm an independent, not a Democrat, so I don't get excited one way or the other about either party, but they're a mess. And the reason they're a mess is they always talk about legislation. They don't talk about actually doing something. Madami gets credit. He said he was going to open grocery stores and save people money there, and he was going to freeze the rent. And those were action items, and he's done them. Whether or not they're positives, time will tell. Donald Trump kind of did the same stuff. I'm going to lower taxes, da 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 da. At least, he gave specifics. Most Democrats, when you hear them talk about Trump or democracy, they extrapolate to the end of the world. Democracy is ending. It's over, right? We've lost. Everything is just the end of the world, which if I'm 25 years old, that's not making me happy. You know, I want to hear about action items that give me a future. And I think that's what the Democrats have to learn how to do. I think James Tallarico is doing a great job. I've talked to, met James multiple times
In Texas?
um, in
They're in
Texas.
Texas,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yep. And, let's hope he wins. I'm not a fan of his opponent. But he's going into red communities. And I think what won him the primary is that when you would see his town halls, they were half red, right? They were in red towns, red counties. He was communicating to people that we never communicated to before, that the Democrats did. And now the Democrats have kind of fallen into a trap where, they wanted to be the big family, right? Everybody was welcome. But now the old school Democrats have all these red lines. You go on Blue Sky if, all the old school Democrats are like, if you don't adhere to everything I say, you're the problem. That doesn't make life better for anybody. At least the DSAs, right or wrong, they're giving you specifics to do things. And they're putting them on social media in a format that gets you excited. And if you get excited about it and you watch it on social media, you're going to get a lot more of it to the exclusion of everything that Chuck Schumer is saying. And I think that has a big impact.
You and I met at a conference recently, and we were talking about our kids, and we were talking about AI. And, I know this is something you think about a lot. It's something a lot of younger people are worried about what does the future look like? What kind of jobs will be there for them? What do you say to your kids? We both have kids who are kind of getting towards the beginning of their career, toward college. What do you say to your kids and maybe other people's kids about how they should get ready for the way that the world is changing right now?
It's like every other technology. It's more capable than other technology I've seen. But there was a point way back when I was a kid that you had to learn how to use a spreadsheet. And people were afraid of learning how to use a spreadsheet. It was expensive. Believe it or not, it cost $500 to buy a spreadsheet. Nobody even thinks about, having to buy a spreadsheet. And, it was hard to learn how to use them back then. You had to memorize all the formula. Nobody thinks twice about that stuff now. It's just common. And I think the same thing will happen with AI. We're going through a transition period. And what I tell my kids is learn it, right? It's an opportunity because it's changing so rapidly. The people who are afraid to dig in and learn it, they're going to fall behind, just like the people who didn't learn how to use spreadsheets, etc. And so now it creates an opportunity for you. It's becomes a whole lot easier to start your own business if you're so inclined. Because I used to have to go into a bookstore or go online to look stuff up. Now you just go into Claude or Chat GPT and say, "Hey, I want to start this kind of business. I want to do a business plan. Here are my thoughts." Put together a business plan, and 12 minutes later, you have all those pieces. You can ask it questions about accounting, whatever. It is just a great democratizer of education and information. And any kid of any age, 12 or 82, can ask it a question and never feel like they don't have access to information. That democratization of information is incredible. And I think now during this transition, it can be painful. But then, we all throughout history, this has happened. There used to be records, and I went to Indiana, and the largest record manufacturing plant was in Terre Haute, Indiana, just down the street. And then RCA they were gone, and then CDs, and then they were gone. And then Napster came along, and everybody thought the music industry was out of luck. And there was a whole movement of information and music wants to be free.
That was my college era, I remember.
Yeah, right? I mean, we're downloading, music and stealing music, right? And every artist thought they were toast. Metallica wouldn't put their music online. The Rolling Stones wouldn't put their music online. We've been through this before. And yes, there's going to be pain. Yes, there's going to be disintermediation. There used to be secretarial schools, right? Back in the 50s, my mom went to school, didn't go to college, went to a secretarial school, so she could learn how to take dictation and be a secretary. And that was a whole wave of women. That was that's where they were getting jobs. In high school, you had to take typing just for
Mine
that.
learned shorthand in the 70s, I think. And yeah, that's also
Right.
obsolete.
Right? So learning shorthand, exactly right. Those jobs are gone. Things will change, but we'll adapt to those changes. And from a political perspective, it is the best thing ever to happen to Democrats ever relative to Republicans. And I'll tell you why. Because what is the Republican meme or libertarian meme about government as it applies to everything?
That it's inefficient and too big.
Add AI. It's going to be efficient because the same quality AI that every business is trying to use right now, some succeeding, some not, using Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it may be, Grok. Government has the same opportunity to use that. Like if I walked in the door, the board of prisons and all the private contracting has been a disaster. I'd be like, okay, feed me all this data, put it into Claude, come up with a business plan, Claude, where I can, cut the cost of what's happening right now, improve the quality of life, reduce recidivism, and implement a plan to do that. And it'll take a couple hours, and you'll have a first step for a plan that you can start working with. That's stuff that you would expected only private enterprise to have access to. But now government has that same access, the exact same large language models that the biggest businesses are using are available every single minute of every single day of forever to improve the efficiency and quality of government. And libertarians, Republicans, whoever on the other side can no longer say, well, you know, it's just bureaucrats. They don't know what they're doing because they're using the same tools.
I hear your optimism, and I hope you're right, Mark. Like, I find AI to be fantastic for research. I have like a whole dossier on you that I use to prep for this interview. But at the same time, I mean, I think one of the big questions is like how rapid this transition will be and how
Mhm.
much pain. And there are different schools of
Oh
thought
no,
on
there's
that.
going to be pain. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, but I'm not the biggest mistake the big language models made, the Claudes, ChatGPTs, et cetera, Groks, is saying there is going to be mass unemployment. 50% of white collar people are going to be out of jobs. When you look at the data right now, The companies that use AI the most are hiring more people now, not less. Now, they may be different. If your whole job was saying yes or no to somebody or just reshuffling reports like from the movie Office Space, I'm waiting on the TPS report, you're going to lose your job, unfortunately. But if at the same time you understand how to use AI and how to apply it to get better outcomes at the company you work with or the job you are doing, you're seeing productivity from people who actually do use AI escalate. And you're seeing companies being able to grow themselves and need more employees to be able to grow, right? But in the interim, like we saw with CDs and like we saw with Napster, there's going to be disintermediation and disruption. I don't think it's going to be the cataclysmic thing that so many have talked to. It was just so dumb when they said that stuff. It was just ridiculous.
There are always people who are left behind, right, though? I mean, whether it's in the Rust Belt or in Detroit, the
For
audio
sure.
industry, if you were advising policymakers, like, what do you think they should be thinking about and doing to prepare for the people who are left behind?
So a lot of different ways you can approach that, right? First of all, I would look and say, what kind of businesses can we bring back to the United States by using robotics, by using AI, because those will create new jobs. I can tell you at Cost Plus Drugs, where we do manufacturing for those drugs that are in short supply, we use robotics and AI. And if we're able to get the permissions from the government, we can literally make generic pills for less than we can buy them from India. And that same scenario applies to a lot of different types of manufacturing. So that's part one. In terms of, part two, if the government is more efficient, let's just say I'm in charge of the SNAP program and I'm able to cut the operational costs down by 40%. And rather than just firing everybody or firing 40% of the people, I let them stay on until they retire, till their retirement age. I just don't replace them. If it were up to me, all those savings I would use to increase the amount of money paid to the SNAP recipients, and put on their cards so they can afford more food. And if you take that same approach for all programs, where rather than just trying to cut costs and do whatever, you try to get more to the people who need it the most. Yeah, there are ways where this can turn into a positive. Yes, there'll still be disintermediation. Yes, there'll still be some pain, but there are ways that you can look at this entrepreneurially and say, look, how do we get more into the hands of people who need it the most? And because that is the ultimate goal. How do we get them better healthcare, better housing, whatever it may be?
I want to ask you about one more thing, Mark. We talk to, you're an independent, but we talk to a lot of Democrats in this space, and everyone is thinking about sort of the future of the party. And there's a lot of attention to what happens in 2 more years to 2028. Whether it's on healthcare, whether it's on AI, what do you want to hear from people running for the Democratic nomination over the next couple of years? What do you think voters need to hear?
Well, I don't want to see him behind a podium or a lectern giving speeches. I want to see them going to high schools and talking to kids about their future and having very specific plans and getting them excited about their future. Talking, to the best schools and the worst schools and everything in between, because those 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they're the people that are going to make all the difference. And what Democrats don't seem to understand, if you can reach them, you're going to reach their parents. And if you can reach, I don't care if you're red, blue, green, or orange in your political leanings, if a politician can reach my kids and get them excited about learning, get them excited about their future, that's who I'm voting for. Because that's one of the biggest fears every parent has. What's the future of their child? Like, I go and talk to kids' schools all the time. And I always try to leave them with the message to look all around the room we're in. You see that high def TV screen there? One day that didn't exist. You see that light? You see the chair you're sitting on? One day that didn't exist. Then somebody came up with the idea, turned that into a business, and now you're sitting on it, watching on a screen that somebody invented. Why can't that be you? Why can't you be the one to change the world, to come up with an idea that's so amazing that everybody is thankful? That's what I want our kids to hear. That's what I want our kids to be excited about. Because if you reach our kids, you're going to reach their parents. And then when you go, don't just, again, stand behind a lectern. Go to somebody's house. Go and say, hey, can we sit down and go through your budget? You're in the, Appalachia, in West Virginia. Let's go through your budget. Let's go through your bank account. I want to see it. I want to know. Democrats right now, affordability, affordability, affordability. Okay, what are you going to do? Affordability, affordability, affordability. And when I've sat in Democrat or Republican events and talked about this, what are you going to do to change that? Maybe when you sit down and talk with a family, you see fees you weren't aware of. You see them doing things or evaluating things in ways you weren't aware of. And let me just tell you, when people see you talking to those people and caring and actually helping them, well, when we get control of the House and Senate, we're going to pass legislation to make everything better. They know that's bullshit. Ain't nobody listening to that or believing that anymore. You have got to sit down there and put your hands on the paper with them and work through it with them to see what the solution is going to be, then literally come up with a plan. I always say ideology is not a strategy. You need to have a strategy to come up with a plan so that you can show people how you can change their lives and overcome the stress. Because the number one thing, whoever is nominated or elected, they only really have one job, and that's to reduce the stress of the American people. And nothing the Democrats are doing is reducing the stress of the American people. Lots of lip service. And then, obviously, as I said before, no social media. Hire Mandami's team, right? Hire Tallarico's team. Get really, really good. Flood the zone, figure it out. But take all the positive things that you can do from talking to these people, make it real, communicate it, flood the zone with it, and then you can start to see and then iterate. Iterate, 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 and learn. If I see that from somebody, I'm going to be like, damn, okay, that's somebody who's really trying to get to the heart of the matters and trying to figure shit out and actually help people and reduce their stress.
Can I ask you, Mark? You talk so passionately about sitting at tables with people and understanding their stress. I mean, is that something that you saw growing up? Is that something you remember from is that something your parents dealt with?
Yeah, I dealt with it. I was broke. I lived 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment in my 20s. I mean, I lived in the ugliest shithole you could ever possibly imagine and had a car with a hole in the floorboard that needed oil every few miles. And so whether it was my parents, whether it was me, whether it was my friends, who are still my friends. You've got to connect to people to understand. And even like I can say I came from this, and then people say, well, you're a billionaire now, you don't get it. Whoever it is that was running, you've got to sit down and meet people where they are and listen, but also try to help and try to learn from what they're telling you so that you can come up with solutions.
Let me ask you before I let you go, Mark. I mean, you have a lot of ideas, and I know you've been talked about before as a potential candidate at some point. Would you ever run for president?
No, my family voted it down. That's just not me.
It's still enough.
I still like having the ideas and I like finding solutions, and I'm happy to share them with anybody. Republican, independent, Democrat, I don't care. But to me as an entrepreneur, that's who I am. Kissing babies, going to budget meetings, sitting down for this, going to formal meetings and having to get dressed up. That's just not my style. Not at all.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your ideas with me.
I appreciate it. It was fun, Sarah. Thank you.
Mark Cuban, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on.